Okay, so George has asked me to take you through case study in terms of what I've been doing on what was a significant construction project, supposedly by award-winning contractors with their BIM processes, with your top information management consultants supporting them, and all the ISO 19650 requirements you can think of, all this terms of this documentation.
Money developers and contractors must.
But it was, yeah. It's typical in terms of what's happened. In terms of you've got 3 buildings, but the architect started off with one big Revit file, so therefore each discipline just produced one big Revit file. But they actually didn't consider that actually those 3 buildings were 3 different facilities, and basically they provided one big Kobe file and one massive zip file containing all the documentation for those 3 buildings, and none of the documentation contained any metadata which was of any use to it. So they didn't consider that basically each building is a separate facility, handed over differently, different uses, and managed different independently by the FM teams looking after them. So the other issue was basically the documents they provided was a record of the project archive. They didn't identify specifically what the documents that were required for the asset management team to maintain and operate the building. So out of about 17,000 files delivered, there was about 1,000 that were concrete cube test files, plus various other things, which may need to be there in the project archive, but they're not there as a requirement for up-to-date asset management. The folder naming, as I said, there was 3 buildings. So they started off with things like fabric, building 1, 2, 3. And then you had the consultants, such as architects. And then under that, you had buildings 1, 2, 3, an electrical building 1, 2, 3, etc. And each of the work packages. So you had building 1, 2, 3 at multiple levels throughout the folder structures, which created these absolutely enormous path lengths, which create a whole series of different issues in terms of how we try to extract it. And there was big problems with actually a lot of the files being delivered, because when they extracted them out of the CDE, a lot of files were left behind because of the failures of the path naming, etc. Another issue was naming of the work packages. The work packages were named based on the company that had done them. So yeah, I've just done like Bob the Builder, Colin Jones, but etc. But then they named their O&Ms, project name onm.pdf. So it told you absolutely nothing about what that O&M was actually dealing with in terms of which work package. So that was one of the other things to actually go through and actually identify those. And even on the front covers of the O&M's further work packages, it told you the company name, but it didn't tell you what it was dealing with. The export from the CDE, that they provided all this as part of the zip file, but what it did is it took the sort of 19650 type identifier, added the description plus the status and the revision. The things like the status text was things like this: CR construction record or A5 suitable for RRBA stage 5 approval. These are all tacked onto the file name. And with the massive big pathing, we were blowing out the 256 characters, creating all sorts of issues there. The descriptions they used had things like commas and alpha sounds in them. So again, we couldn't actually put them back into zips because to upload them to other things, we had to end up manually going through, renaming things or running scripts to deal with that because of the naming conventions that we used. So we took this whole task in terms of how we broke the documentation that was down into different buildings. We changed the work packages, structured those so they were named so you actually knew what you were looking for. We used a utility to basically go through all of the folders, extract the data, the bit of coding that we wrote, and create our own Excel file. So we could then basically go through, store the old name and the new name against things, and old folder structure, new folder structure. And then we also decomposed the file identifiers. So under the BS or the ISO 19650, we know that whereas a -A, basically that's architecture, etc. We knew that ZXX001 was building 1, 04 was level 4. So from the coding, the fields, we could actually put some metadata against the files. We also knew where the description was, so in terms of the length of those for particular file lengths, and we could also get the file types. So if we knew it was a DWG, we know it's an Autodesk drawing file. So this basically allowed us to add to the metadata to deal with it. So we've gone through, as I said, 17,000 odd files, restructured the whole project using these utilities and time. And hopefully now we've got a much better chance of being able to find information, the information that we trust, because no longer we've got all the duplicates that were all over the place. And there's even multiple revisions of the same file sometimes, but we've still kept the history and the audit trail.
Thank you, Paul. That's excellent. So the principal idea here is that these are the sorts of tools, processes, and utilities that the members of the consulting group of the Golden Thread Task Force will have access to. So if you are a data geek, as it were, that are interested in doing that, don't take that the wrong way, Paul. Then we can share that with you. So maybe put data management into the chat. Okay,
Ahmed.
Hi there.
Richard, we've got a question Q&A after this. So,
George, would you stop interrupting my chairing?
Okay.
Thank you. Ahmed.
Just wanted to ask about a couple of things.
Very quickly, give me one.
Why isn't this included in the IDP, and why isn't workflows imposed on the CDE for the transition of a project information model to an asset information model, where the exact purpose of that is to stop things such as that ever being received in this manner?
I think the big issue on those is these are sort of the typical things under BS 1192, the naming conventions and stuff. But stuff like that has now seems to have got forgotten under ISO 19650. You're right, but I think a lot of the issue was the naming of files from, let's say, the architects and the design teams was dealt with. But when it came to the subcontractors, and the big issue was descriptions when they're putting stuff into the CDE, that's where a lot of the special characters seem to have been put in. And when they exported the format they exported from the CDE, where they included the description, that created a lot of the problems.
Ryan, very briefly.
Just very briefly, Paul, you mentioned COBie. Did you get COBie data in spreadsheet formats that could be machine readable, consumed into a system database that can support COBie?
Yes, we did, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But there you go. Anna, very briefly.
A fantastic presentation, Paul. I just wanted to agree with everything you were saying. The reason why this happens is that obviously during construction, everyone is naming things because however it fits them to do it, yeah. And unless there is a very strict information manager on board who is looking both at what client needs to receive and also what the team needs to be doing, and then translating between those two and making sure everyone does what they need to be doing, none of this will happen. Yeah. So even if we had the best standards in place, you do need to have a mom in place. Yeah. A person who is looking at everyone and saying, no, you need to do this like this because the client wants this. And also the client needs to know.
Yeah, no alsos. Sorry, Anna, no alsos. Right. We're going to move swiftly on to Cliff, who's got a case study on digital handover.
Hello, I'm just sharing my screen. Thank you very much. I'm going to go through the scenario. Sorry, my name's Cliff. I'm an information manager, so you might want to call me Mum from now on. So I like that. The scenario is that you're the client and you've been asked to confirm receipt of the golden information at handover, and we're also going to be looking at the regulation 38 information specifically for emergency lighting. So I'm just going to take you through what that actually involves at the coalface, if you've been asked to either build a golden thread on somebody's behalf, or whether you've just been asked to confirm that you have everything. So one of the challenges is that the documents aren't all as-builts. Sometimes they're marked up as as-built, but they're full of notes. Now, this is the door schedule, and some of these notes are asking things like, are there smoke seals on this door? That's quite an important question. We don't know whether it's been answered or not. So you might be able to confirm that you've got this document, but is it correct? Here's another example of the same document.
Can everybody see this? Can everybody see this? I've got a lot of chat in the chat saying they can't see the presentation.
I can see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
I can see it.
Okay, well, maybe they...
Okay, carry on, Cliff, carry on.
Yeah, sure, no worries. Okay, also, so I have to say that a lot of these things are small, but they add up to death by 1,000 cuts when you're trying to actually get organised. So we have spelling mistakes. So if you were looking for the life safety tray using OCR, it wouldn't find it within this drawing because safety is spelled incorrectly. Anything about the retained facade, that's spelled incorrectly. Schematic instead of schematic, so you won't find these drawings either if you're trying to find them. Also, inside documents, you have location to be confirmed depending on the CBRE review. So that also, has that been answered or not? Has the location, been confirmed? We also have notes inside technical transmittals. Don't know whether they've been resolved. The same here. More examples, and also Paul touched on it earlier. When you're downloading files, if the path name is too long, it'll stop downloading it, but you might just get the file path, but nothing, the file will actually be empty. So that's another, difficulty. Also, sometimes you're given information, you're just given maybe a login to a system, and when you go to the system, you find that you've got to find your way around the folder naming convention, the file naming convention, and you'll find that there are zip files. It looks pretty simple when you open that, but you might find that this zip file contains zip files as well, and those zip files will contain trees and folder structures inside there with files, and you've got to sort of unpick it all and peel it all apart and put it all back together again. So this is how many zip files there were on this particular project. There were about 40 zip files, and the system that we were downloading from didn't allow you to download zip files as a bulk, so they all had to be downloaded individually and unzipped individually. We also have challenges with inconsistent folder structure and folder naming conventions. I know that Paul has just touched on that. So here's a few examples. We've got proposed level 01, and here we've got it the other way around. You've got the ground floor and then level. We've got here first floor level, and here we've got second floor level and then second level 2. So you can't just find everything pertaining to a particular level just by doing a simple search. You're only going to get some of the information. Also, when it comes down to fire stopping, we noted that whilst the drawings actually indicated where the fire stopping was, it wasn't clear which product you would use in that location. And we found 9 different products, but it's unclear as to which product to use where. On the reflected ceiling plan, we noticed that it's very illegible. There's an emergency light here, just underneath here somewhere. So in order to find that, you're going to have to open the document, zoom in and pan around so that it's almost, very, very large on the screen. So unclear, obscured information is another problem. I mean, even though I'm zoomed right in now, you can just about read the fact that there's an emergency exit light there. I've also got difficulties with, there's a document number here, and that's the document, and this file is attached to it. When you download all the information from some of these systems, you're not sure whether you're actually getting all of the information, because some of it is embedded, some of it is linked. So it might say you've got 1,500 files. By the time you've downloaded it, you might only have 1,000, or you might have 2,000. So you can never really be sure whether or not you have all the information about the building. So this little bit is focused specifically on Regulation 38. So let's say you were you're working for a housing association and you were asked to make yourself familiar with this building and find out about the emergency lighting. So you might start off with the fire safety manual, which would tell you the emergency lighting. To look for it, you need to look at the fire strategy, MEP consultant specifications, electrical lighting record drawings, architect's reflected ceiling plan, the health and safety file. And for testing and commissioning, you need to go here. For associated record drawings, you need to go here. And for installers details, installer competence, product details, specifications, and any assumptions, you need to look in this package. So you need to refer to 8 different locations for 13 different pieces of information just for one system. And this is what this looks like. So you go into the system and you type in fire strategy or emergency lighting, and you will find some information in some of the documents. Once you've found the document, you then open it and you get little snippets of information, little snippets everywhere. You might find a specification. This is all about British standards that need to be met. Again, snippets of information. This is just searching for emergency lighting. This is also tender issue. Is that correct? Should we be looking at tender issue at handover? Maybe this needs to be updated. When you're looking at the specifications, you do start to get some images, so it starts to make a little bit more sense. Emergency backup, so you might want to assume that that is emergency light. You can make the assumption that it is, but maybe it isn't. Maybe it's just the backup that's emergency. And then you find something here. So this looks like an emergency exit sign to me. So maybe that's it, but without actually knowing, you're just going to be confronted with maybe hundreds of different lights, and it's for you to determine which ones are actually part of the emergency lighting system. So looking at the record drawings now for MEP, you're going into the health and safety file. It lists out the drawings, and there were no drawings titled emergency lighting. Again, back onto the reflected ceiling plan, the next place to look. Again, we've already looked at this a little bit earlier, so you've got to zoom right in to find anything. Then you find something that's quite useful. It's a schedule of testing and commissioning, and it does mention emergency lighting here. So, but it doesn't actually give you any more information other than whether or not it's being tested. So you start to look into the next section that you're directed to from the fire safety manual was the electrical testing and commissioning, and you start to piece together these document references. It's 6.12, and if you look carefully at the document reference here, you can see SO2, section CO2 612, and after a while of looking at it, you think, okay, so that's what that document is there, and there it is. So you have to do quite a lot of reading and squinting, and lots of cups of coffee to get through this, believe you me. You open it up, you've got the emergency lighting certificate, and then you've got this reference here and the type, so and a drawing number here as well. So you think, okay, I'm going to go off and look for these types and these drawing numbers. You know, this is my first day at work with this new housing association. I think I'm going to give my notice in already. Electrical testing and commissioning. I'm just putting myself in the shoes of somebody who's just started with a new company. They've been told to get their head around this building. So you scroll down and you see these drawings, which have been sort of photocopied and scanned in. All the pages are wobbly. Once again, you know, if you're allowed to rotate it, you can rotate it. In this case, you weren't allowed to rotate it. You had to scroll using the zoom bars left and right, up and down, until you finally, you know, have gone all the way around the drawing and found out that these two were the emergency lights. Again, it says tender issue. It's not as built. What does ID GF04 relate to? That's unclear. Yeah, it opens up in portrait. It can't be changed to landscape. Again, don't worry, I'm going as fast as I can. So, so again, the same sort of scenario. You're still just trying to find out where is the emergency lighting in this building, and you're opening up more information. So here we've got a lighting certificate. So again, 6.98, that's section 6.98, and there's the emergency lighting certificate, and it's upside down. And I can't read this writing. I probably would struggle even if it was the right way up, but yeah, no chance. So here we've got the emergency lighting certificate, so that's good. Where are we now? We're looking for the associated record drawings. So my comment is, why is there not a list of relevant drawings? So I'm often asked, is there a list of drawings? Is there a schedule, a list of equipment? The answer is yes, but there's not a full list or a master list. So you've got to go into different documents to find different lists, but nowhere is the whole list in one master list so that you can check off against it. So only one return for emergency voice control, and it's not emergency lighting. Again, I'm just looking inside the drawing register and record drawings. I'm looking for emergency lighting drawings. Can't find any easily. Installer details, none were found. Installer competence, none were found. And we're going through looking for exit signage or stairs, still trying to think, okay, so, stairs and exits often have emergency lighting. Maybe that will give me a clue. And, lo and behold, stumble across this product data for this particular light, and it rings a bell. I saw that earlier in the specification, so it looks like I'm onto a good thing. But again, I'm not quite sure where these product types tie into it all. This is the lighting system O&M manual, which was found in this list. Now, there's in the O&M manual, I then find the equipment schedule. Now, in the fire safety manual, there was no mention of the O&M manual. So it's only because I stumbled across it whilst looking for the other information that I was pointed towards that I found the O&M manual. When I looked in here, there's an asset reference, which is type exit 1, and that tells me it's an all light, and there's the supply product, a number, and I can't quite remember what this was all about, but oh yeah, operating instructions also in the O&M manual, and manufacturer's literature is also in the O&M manual. So lighting systems and O&M manual, this is all part of it, maintenance information, fault finding procedures and recommended spares. So that's all the information that was found on that. Did also stumble across this drawing, which wasn't listed anywhere, but opened it up, and it actually has got, it's the electrical services basement lighting layout. It's not the emergency lighting, so it's all in one layout. So if you were looking for emergency lighting, you wouldn't find it. And when you zoom into this drawing, you start to see exit 1. This is the sign. So where is it? Do you see this little code here, B2E? These are these codes here. So finally, you start to, the lights come on, and you're like, okay, now I get it. Now I get it. So basically, this is the manufacturer's way of referring to this item, and this is the drawing that you find it on. But it takes quite a long while to get there. So some possible solutions to these. And it's not easy, really, this whole thing, but I can see a lot of improvement, and everybody is trying now to use file naming conventions, but unfortunately they're being used in different ways by different people. So it's inconsistently wrong rather than consistently wrong. So this is a file naming convention based on ISO 19650 Annex 2021, which is a big improvement on the previous version because it puts the functional breakdown further up the tree, which means you can now have things like emergency lighting, and you can package things together. So you've got the main project, sub-project, building services engineer, section 61, emergency lighting for level 1. It's a drawing, the discipline is electrical, and there's the drawing number. So this would be the file naming convention. So ideally, this would be circulated at the very beginning of the project, which is not hard to do. It's an Excel spreadsheet, easy to circulate, easy to understand. Everybody signs up to this. They all produce their task or master information delivery plan. So when they're asked what information they'll be delivering, they come up with their code based on the previous slide, and then they submit that, and then that all gets put into the master information delivery plan, which sits at the top of the tree. And when you've got your database, you look at the master information delivery plan, and you can check off against everything that's actually in that database. So this is basically a cornerstone of ISO 19650. Another way to do it is to tag the information and put it all into a project information model. Okay, so here's a project information model that we've put it into. So this particular project, you look for documents. And then,
Cliff, are we nearly there?
Yeah, we're nearly there. Yeah.
Okay, can you speed it up as much as you can, please?
This is going to just take a second. You're rushing me on my spelling now.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, you see, I spelt it wrong now. I can spell emergency. Right. Okay. So this information was eventually brought into the database, and everything was tagged with emergency lighting. Obviously, if it was emergency lighting, and then it found 37 items within a split second. So we're working towards SharePoint into a database, which is much easier.